Welcome to the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. Now, here's your host, author, speaker, entrepreneur, Cornell Jermaine.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. We have a special guest with us. She is an entrepreneur, author, and I would say a Bible teacher. I don't know if she carries that title, but to some degree she does teach the Word of God. Please help me welcome Miss Danica Smith. Danica, how are you?
I'm doing great, Cornell. Thank you for having me today.
No problem. Now, I don't want to put titles on you that don't belong. Now, I know you teach the Word, but are you a pastor or a minister?
No, I'm not. I'm just a servant that have an interest in the Bible, and God is using me.
We're so glad to hear that. Well, that makes it even more interesting because now you get to inspire some people, and we'll get more into the story. But I want to start. I'm excited to talk to you about what you have going on because the subject matter that you deal with really is something that affects everyone, especially those who are believers. And you have inspirational products and faith-based publications and services. And I want to get first into your love for the Bible. Tell me, where did your interest in the Bible come from?
You know, I'm a Louisiana native, so I grew up in the church. I grew up watching my mother and grandmother praise God, and the Bible just was a part of my family. It was a part of me. I always laugh and I said, my grandmother, I would basically read the 23rd Psalms to her up to the point where I memorized it. So I can't really tell you a time that it wasn't a part of me. I grew up with it.
Okay. Now your background professionally is engineering, correct?
Yes. I have a Bachelor in Science and Engineering degree from the University of Florida, but I'm happily saying that I'm an HBCU graduate from Southern University of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and that was my origins of a BS in chemistry. So I'll tell them my Jaguars.
Wow. Now, so how did you transition into the work that you're doing now with the spiritual and inspirational publications?
Well, as an engineer, I received my business degree, and when the company closed its doors, I opened an interactive fitness center for children. The need was just alarming as far as obesity rates were increasing. So I opened this gym, but when the economy went down, so did my business. And when you feel that God has given you a gift and a blessing, and I was seeing wonderful results. I mean, children were, talking about their self-esteem changing, their parents were excited, and when something like that is pulled away from you, you can't understand I couldn't understand why God was taking it from me. So I found myself in a very depressed state. I pretty much stayed locked in my room for a long time. Didn't really want to interact too much with people, and no matter how much my mother called and people tried to encourage me, it just wasn't working. And one day I heard Donald Lawrence's Encourage Yourself, and it did something. It just stirred something in me, and I started reading my Bible, and that's what I did every day for hours. I was like, I couldn't read enough, and the stories looked like they were just becoming alive to me till I started telling my friends about the stories. And at some point they told me, they said, man, one of my friends told me, every time you start talking, you look like you get so excited. It's like something goes on in you. And then later one time they told me, said, maybe you should write a book, because I had a stack of notes. Because by telling them stories and they listening to their comments, I started taking notes. And so when she said, maybe you should write a book, no, not me. I'm not writing a book. And I blew it off. But over time, I had a stack of notes, and I put the notes in a computer because I was afraid of losing the notes, never, ever considering it being a book. But needless to say, 7 years later, God had other plans, and Love, Faith, and Destiny was born.
Wow. Now, you mentioned your organization, and I guess since you opened up, I want to take time to kind of hone in on that a little bit because it's such a great work. It's called the Childhood Fit Arcade, correct?
It was the
Community Fit Arcade.
And right now, that's the restoration part, because after all of this, recently I started working back once again with childhood obesity and coming under the nonprofit 501c3 as Community Fit Arcade. Yes.
Okay. Now give us a little insight as to what the work. I know it has to do with health and wellness, but what's your approach with it that's different from what we've been seeing?
Well, the combination right now is reaching out. The original was childhood obesity, but over time, in reaching and talking to communities and going to different churches, I'm realizing that there's a huge kind of a disconnection between people taking care of their spiritual bodies, but they don't take care of their physical bodies. Many people go to church several times a week, but they would not take time to take a walk to the community. I would say not even to go to the gym, just to take time to walk in. And I tell them that, God has given you a gift. Your body is a gift. And we should, we have a responsibility to take care of it. So that's the combination, what communities fit. And what we're doing now is we've been traveling with something called the Faith and Fitness Tour, where I'm talking about the books, the Love, Faith, and Destiny book, my book, and also about fitness. And the response has been awesome, because a lot of times, a lot of people, we don't combine the two. We separate them.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And we see that if you pay attention, particularly in the Black church, if you pay attention to our generation, you can see that. You can see that we have the spiritual thing down pat. We don't mind praying and interceding and praising God, but when it comes to our personal health, wellness, we tend to take it for granted. And right. I think that's a great right. thing. And honestly, I think that's another book for you eventually. I don't want to put any more work on you.
Okay, Cornell.
but it's so needed. It's so needed, because I don't think we in our churches think about it until, you're in the hospital or the doctor says, oh, right. you need this medication, or, we don't really take it right. into consideration until we're exhausted, and being a person who's in the music ministry, anybody in any leadership in ministry, I mean, it takes exertion, it takes energy, and you got to be healthy to get up there and do that work. You can't,
right.
you'll kill yourself trying to do some of the work that we have to do. So I think understanding the connection between the two is so important, and I applaud you. You say that you've been quoted as saying that when you were going through a tough time in your life, that some of the men and women of faith in the Old Testament helped you survive. Give us a couple of people and their stories and how it helped you. What people specifically in the Bible did you recall during that time?
It's different for me, because it's almost like some stories, it spoke to me at certain times. It's, when I see the stories became alive to me. It was almost like I was becoming that person. So if I'm struggling at the moment with courage, I'll look at David and I'll say, man, God, give me the strength of David, because David had to go against Goliath, but he didn't think about how big Goliath was. He just said, come on, give me these stones, let me knock him down. So, for one story, and as I started doing, actually talking more about the book, I started thinking about the different stories and how it related so much to my own story. Yeah, we did a conference, and it was called Restoration. And the lady actually doesn't have a name in the Bible, but the prophet had blessed her with a child, right? She was barren. The prophet blessed her with a child, and then the child died. When the child died, I love this story, but when the child died, the husband ran up to her and he asked her, like, where are you going? So she took the child, she laid him in the prophet's room, because they had an upper room for the prophet. She laid the child there. She told him, give me a servant, give me a donkey, basically. I'm going to the prophet. She took off. She never, ever said anything about her child being dead. She never spoke that. She just took off and was like, I got to get to the prophet. So when the prophet's servant ran up to her and said, is everything okay? Because they saw her coming up the road. They said, is everything okay? Is all is well with your husband? She said, all is well. Is all is well with your child? She said, all is well. Is everything okay? He said, is everything okay with your child, basically? She said, all is well. She never spoke anything. But when she got to the prophet, she fell at the prophet's feet, and she told him, she got to the man of God, basically. The prophet restored her son. Now, I'm going to fast forward. That same lady, when it was time to have a famine, the prophet warned her of the famine. She was obedient and she left. When it was time for the famine to end, she was going to go before the king to try to get her possessions back. When she got there, the prophet's servant, Gehazi, was already there talking about the prophet and the blessing that he had, how he blessed this lady and her son and brought her son back to life. So when she walked up in the king's palace, the servant was already there. So I always say the favor of God had already made. It was there before she got into that place. She didn't have to do anything. When she got there, the servant basically told the prophet, "Oh, there she goes right there. That's the woman I'm talking about. She's the one that the prophet restored her son. Our possessions were restored. He gave her extra things." So for me, that story reminds me so much of my own self at this point. And that didn't come to me until actually by talking about this at a conference one time. We started talking, the theme was restoration. And I'm like, wow, God, that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing with me. I could not understand why you took this away from me when you gave it to me, the business. I couldn't understand that. But even with this lady, if you stay in faith and you trust God, He will do it. He will restore. He will bless. And so that's how that's how I use the stories. And I guess when I think about how it's not just stories, God didn't have someone record the stories just so they can be entertaining. He gave it to us to encourage us. He gave it to us so we can see in them, while He did it for them, He'll do it for me. And I think that's what became alive to me as I started reading and reading more, like, whoa, He's the same God. He doesn't change. The same way He took Moses and He moved them across. He moved them out of Egypt. That's the same way He'll move me from a rough land into my promised land. So.
Wow. That's great. Now you said something key. You said stay in faith, and when you said that, it just like light bulb. Give our listeners a couple of practical steps, because I think a lot of people go to church and they hear different things over the pulpit, but sometimes they don't know how to apply it. They don't know what it really means. Give us a couple of steps on how people who may be transitioning from their wilderness into the land of promise, how can they stay in faith?
I think that's a combination of things. I use an acronym, and it's called SWIFT. Actually, it's becoming a brand. I'm working on it. But standing, speaking, walking, and faith. Okay? So stand in faith is standing. It's making a decision that I've heard God's voice. I know what He told me. Okay? It's identifying. It's knowing. It's recognizing it. Right? It's speaking it. Say it out loud. I am moving into the place that God has shown me. Don't speak negative about it. Don't start talking about what it seems like is not going to happen. Well, someone comes along, well, girl, I don't know what's going to happen. God told me He was going to do that. No. God said He's going to do it, and you have to continue to speak on that. And said, as you know how God sees it, speak the word of God on your future. Walking in it. When I say walking in it, is actually taking those steps and keep moving. A lot of times people say, God gave me this, but they stay there. They stand up and they keep waiting like it's just going to hit them. You have to work too. You have to walk in it as you walk into it. In faith is believing God constantly. Is believing His word and trusting in Him. So those are my steps.
Now, back to your book, Love, Faith, and Destiny. What are you hoping readers will gain from this book?
Well, I hope readers will gain one of the things that I did, and that was I want them to be encouraged. I want them to see that they can overcome anything, that God will love them unconditionally, that God's love is always there. I want them to, I want people to experience basically experience what I did, even on a higher level than I did. And that is to get to know God even better than I ever had before through these different people and experiencing them. You know, one thing that happened to me while I was reading, after I finished the book, it was at the very end of the book. I was excited. I'm sitting outside of Panera Bread, and it came to me, does this book tell you why Jesus had to come? And it blew my mind. Basically broke my heart because I thought I had just did everything. I did everything that God had put in my spirit, the way he put it in me. I changed a couple of things based on some things he gave me. But at that moment, early that morning, I considered revelation knowledge. He told me to change a couple of sections. He revealed something to me, and I did a few changes. But when I looked at it and I went through the book, you know how you do something, but you never really understand the true purpose? The true purpose came to me much later, which was, when you look at this book gave me a true appreciation to why Jesus had to come. So we celebrate Jesus, but sometimes you got to, I guess for myself, let me just speak for my own self. When I understood better of all that happened before Jesus came, I just had an appreciation that I had never had before, because it gave me the history. And I understood the history as to say, boy, whew, I'm so happy you came. Because so many things had happened, and so many things, and I can see the preparation of how God prepared for Jesus to come. He rebuilt the city. He protected the city. He did all of this first, and then he sent his son. So, but to answer your question, I just want people to experience God's love and to know more than anything that he is the same, and he doesn't change. In the same way he did for those people back then, it's the same love he has for us.
That's great. Now, the book, Love, Faith, and Destiny, is a compilation of short Bible stories of God's amazing love and his redemption and his promises that we may have forgotten. You take these stories and you make them very easy for people to understand. I want to throw out a few characters, or not characters, people from the Bible of the Old Testament. I just want you to extract a few lessons that we can learn from their story. First, let's start with Moses. What can we learn from the life of Moses?
Moses is a great example of most of us. You know, we can basically do the worst thing in the world. In Moses' case, he killed a man and moved away and basically was considered a fugitive. But at the same time, God was like, hey, it's time for me to use you. Come on back. You can't run. And he used Moses. And he used Moses in a mighty way, to the point where he was one of the greatest leaders in the Bible. You know, Moses led the Egyptians out of Egypt. And the thing with Moses that was so amazing and heartbreaking to me was that Moses had all of this, but he still had a streak of anger in him. So when Moses got to the point where at one point in the story, Moses strikes the rock, God told him, speak to the rock. But the people were so hard-headed, and they kept on complaining and murmuring. He got frustrated, and his anger took over, and he struck the rock. Because of that, God wanted to show the people basically the same thing we're saying now. Hey, I'm still here. I'm still in control. But by him striking the rock, it makes it appear that it was his force that did it. Because of that, Moses did not walk into his promised land. But the part that I like about it for most people is the fact that God used Moses. He didn't say Moses was a killer and Moses killed a man. No, he still used him, and he used him in a mighty way.
So in essence, no matter what we've done, how bad, God can still use us. He can still wash us and make us clean.
Exactly. So we aren't unworthy because of our mistakes.
That's right. Okay, let's go with Ruth. What about Ruth? What can we learn from her life?
Ruth, I think Ruth is one of the best examples of loyalty. You hear a lot of people talk about their mother-in-laws and their family members. But when you read the story and experience Ruth, you see a woman that basically put herself second to take care of her mother-in-law. She could have stayed in her land with her family, but she left to go to an unknown land to be a protector, in a sense, of her mother-in-law and receive a blessing for a new husband. He wasn't just a new husband. He protected her. You know, Ruth went into a new land. She went to Bethlehem. Ruth was a Moabite. And then, you know, and there's other history on Ruth and, you know, Moabite. She was in the land of Moab. But for me, she went to this land that was unknown to her. She went to Bethlehem, and she met a man by the name of Boaz. And a lot of people say, well, in current day, where is my Boaz? But Ruth went to a land, and Boaz was a wealthy farmer. He protected Ruth. So when Naomi told her to basically go out there and get food, and they had to find a way to survive, in a sense, when she went out there to farm, Boaz told the men, don't touch Ruth. Ruth had favor on her. The favor of God was with Ruth, to the point where she asked him, basically, why are you doing this for me? And he basically told her, because of the favor of God, God was with her. And Ruth became Boaz's wife. And then, if you go way down the line, from the line of Ruth is where the line of Jesus will come from. So, I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Wow. So with Ruth, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I never noticed, or I guess paid attention to the loyalty that she exhibited, and that's exactly what it was, the loyalty, and how she's a great example of how if we learn to serve one another, God will bless us in return. Wow.
Exactly.
So let's go lastly with Joseph. What can we learn from the life of Joseph?
Oh, man, I would get so excited with Joseph's story. I think this is one I would tell people all the time, because Joseph's story, to me, is like no other. I think with Joseph's story is forgiveness. I think Joseph is a great example of forgiveness. To have a situation where you're excited about a dream, and I can see this in today's time. You know, imagine yourself, you just had a wonderful dream, and you go to your siblings and you tell them that I'm going to be in a high position, and all of you basically going to be under me. And your brothers and your siblings get jealous to the point where they decide to put you in a pit and leave you there, but they end up selling you instead of killing you. And then Joseph rose up. Once again, favor of God. Despite where he was in his condition, he rose up through all these situations, and when it came down time for him to see his brothers again, he could have turned his back on him, on all of them, because there was a famine in their land, so they had to come to the land of Egypt to get food. Who was the man that was in charge in Egypt at the time? Joseph. So when they came to get food, he recognized them. He forgave them, and he blessed them to the point where all of his family ended up coming and live in the land of Egypt. It all could have stopped right there, in a sense, if he would have said, I do not know these people. Don't give them anything. Y'all left me for dead. But basically, well, y'all sold me and separated me from my father and my family. But he forgave them. Wow. So forgiveness is one of the things I love about Joseph's story.
Wow. Amazing. I'm excited, and I know this book is going to bless many. It has already blessed many people. Tell us, where can we purchase it?
You can purchase the book at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or you can go to my website, LoveFaithDestinyBook.com.
There you have it, Love, Faith, and Destiny. Danica, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. This has been the Build on Beauty podcast, where beauty is born skin deep. I'm your host, Cornell Jermaine. Until next time, let your soul be made whole. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Build on Beauty podcast. For more information about our host, please visit CornellJermaine.com.